Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. A great episode in store for you today. Anthony Power and I are going to be reviewing some of the lesser followed, lesser discussed models or strategies in the Bitcoin mining, HPC, and AI space, specifically as it relates to Soluna Holdings, Bit Digital / WhiteFiber, and Hut 8 / ABTC. So exciting episode in store. Before we get into it, take a second, smash the like button, guys. Big help to myself and the channel. Anthony loves it. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comments section below what you think about these various strategies and if you're currently holding any of these 5 stocks. With that being said, let's get into today's video. All right, guys, away we go. Monday afternoon, the start to another trading week. Unfortunately for the Bitcoin investors, another difficult weekend with Bitcoin dropping into the low 80,000s over the 2-day period. Seems to have a little of a bounce this morning, Anthony, up over 85 now, but nowhere close to where we ended last week.
No, we were at 91, 92,000 yesterday, and when I woke up this morning in Bangkok, I was surprised it had dropped quite a few thousand. I think it was down to 86,000. Now, there was obviously rumors out about the Bank of Japan maybe hiking interest rates, and so that, the concerns of that have probably affected, the markets themselves. Also, one thing we've said a lot of times about Bitcoin and some of these other cryptocurrencies is the leverage trading that goes on is just, it's obscene. And to be honest with you, we saw a massive leverage wipeout and liquidations. I think something like 860 million was wiped out in long positions in the early hours. And that's what that creates. And it's just a cascade of as stops are triggered. So there'll be people that have stops in place there that they'll sell at a point in time. And as that stop occurs, there's more and more selling going there. So you've got a highly leveraged, positions, have just been flushed out effectively. The broader, market sentiment, if you look at the other three stock indices that we sometimes highlight, the Nasdaq, the S&P, the Dow Jones, they're also, in red today as well. So a lot of macroeconomic issues, and Bitcoin is probably just falling in line. And one thing I will say, there's no. I've searched social media today. There's no clear indication from any sort of like negative catalysts supporting this drop here. Most people are now saying Bitcoin is not in a 4-year cycle. It's sort of we've evolved from that now. And you think about the ETFs, which were approved last year, and the way they've been incessantly buying Bitcoin, as more and more investors have access to purchasing ETFs instead of buying Bitcoin through their accounts. You've seen that relentless buying. So, we're trying to figure out, if there is, any sort of catalyst that's causing this. But we knew a few weeks ago it was some sellers, long-term holders of Bitcoin have been selling at the 100,000 mark, and we saw some really big trades. We're always going to see this leverage trades affecting, up and down, the shorts and the longs that are just, equally, people are trying to make money in a very short space of time. They see some of these YouTubers out there who've been doing it for years, driving around Dubai in Rolls Royces and $20 million houses out there, and they think they can follow them. And it's just, it just creates, a lot of problems for the network itself. And as I say, a lot of liquidations overnight, and then we're waking up to seeing the Bitcoin price, at the moment about 85,000. So it's been a challenging day, but at the end of the day, you've got to zoom out these days. These are the volatile days, and as we move forward, hopefully with adoption, we're seeing far more states take on Bitcoin now. We're seeing more and more companies. We've highlighted this even last week. The amount of public companies that are having Bitcoin on the balance sheet now is increasing, and the amount of Bitcoin to get into that top 100 is massively increasing week by week. So there's no shortage of buyers, but there is some other activities that are affecting the price at the moment. And a mix of what I've said today is probably some of the reasons for that drop overnight.
Yeah, I think you're right there. And I was definitely one of those buyers over the weekend. You can see it in the chart as well. As you say, it's those triggerings of the stop losses. It's almost a snowball effect. It wasn't a gradual trickle. You can see the Bitcoin price literally fell off a cliff there and dropped, I think, $4,000 in a matter of minutes. So definitely some geopolitical tension as well around the world right now. I know the Caribbean is a hot spot. We've got tension in Europe. You talked about Japan. So really a mixture of these factors. But again, doesn't help the Bitcoin miners. So if we pull up the chart here, you can see BitZero actually faring the best out of the miners. Hive in the other end of the spectrum. Everyone currently in the red.
Yeah, there's been a lot of red for the last few weeks now. We've seen obviously the Bitcoin price fall from its all-time high, which was about 6 weeks ago, 126,000. We're still seeing some of the analysts expecting Bitcoin price to get another high, but what we're seeing now is a sort of like by the end of January. So I watched a couple of interviews today on CNBC, and those people who were saying end of December have now moved to the end of January. And I don't blame them, to be honest. I mean, you only got 4 weeks, and the price is 40,000 lower than it was 6 weeks ago. So we know Bitcoin can rally, that in a couple of days. But it's going to be someone who's going to really put their neck on the line to say Bitcoin's going to be an all-time high this week. So maybe give themselves a little bit of room for maneuver. But the overarching feeling is that over a longer period of time we will see higher highs in Bitcoin and Ethereum for many of those companies looking at it as Ethereum, and also from a treasury management position.
Yeah, you're certainly right there, Anthony. Now, we've talked about this decoupling between Bitcoin, the Bitcoin miners. We're going to talk about some data center strategies throughout today's presentation. But on big red drawdowns like this, it's almost impossible for the miners to come out completely unscathed.
Yeah, and if you look at the rather than just look at the day range today, look at the 52-week range. That's a clear indication of what's happening at the moment. You can see sort of like those miners in that bottom 7 or 8 miners there are very, very close to their 52-week lows. And some of the miners above them are sort of maybe a little bit closer to the 52-week highs. And those ones at the high ones there are the ones that really have announced some deals. The likes of Cipher, the likes of IREN, the likes of TeraWulf, Core Scientific up there as well. CleanSpark just announcing that purchase of land, maybe giving them some added movement there. But even CleanSpark share price at the moment at $14.52, it's a long way from its 52-week high of nearly $24. So there's a lot of movement to get back to those levels there, and so we say decoupling. Maybe Bitcoin still has a link to these companies, which are predominantly still mining Bitcoin. I mean, we talk about the HPC side of the house, but until those data centers are built, these companies are mining Bitcoin. And we'll find out in maybe, as Ben's put it, in the next 2.5 years, we'll find out those miners that are really in for the long haul. And it seems that the more and more CEOs we speak to, the less and less we're seeing those that are looking to increase hash rate over a longer period, and really just using the current hash rate to get some good cash flow in now as these new data centers are built. So the switch over to HPC is more seamless, and they've had cash coming in to help cover some of those costs without having to go out and borrow it. I just want to say one thing on BitZero there. I think we've got an interview this week, Bryce, with the CEO and the president, and also somebody from your neck of the woods.
Yeah, it sounds like Kevin O'Leary is going to be stopping by the channel. He's actually a strategic advisor in BitZero, deeply involved with the management team. They IPO'd just a few weeks ago here on the CSE in Canada. This is going to be their inaugural interview. So you get the CEO, you get Kevin O'Leary. We're going to be talking about data center strategy up here in Canada. Kevin has been a vocal advocate for building large-scale AI data centers using natural gas generation here in the province of Alberta. So that's going to be one to watch. I'm also glad you brought up the fact markets are forward looking, and there's a lot of excitement right now about these HPC AI contracts. But as you said, Anthony, until those revenues start coming in, whether these companies like it or not, they are Bitcoin miners. Very akin to what you said at the start of your comments about Bitcoin price. also forward looking, which is why we don't give price targets on either one of these. We'll leave that to the experts. Now, we talk about data center strategy. We were fortunate to go down to Silverton to the Soluna facility, Dorothy 1 and 2. We got to see their modular design, meet with the team. They've now put out their Caddy one project groundbreaking video. So the actual groundbreaking took place previously. However, they now put together the corporate video. We're going to talk about this strategy as it relates to Soluna. They've got a very unique angle with the hosting, with the renewable behind the meter approach, and then some of the other kind of unique or differentiated models we've seen. Now, we've got the clip itself. It's about a 3.5 minute video. So I would recommend you guys go take a look. We're going to be splicing that in and out throughout the conversation here. But if we take a look at their investor presentation, the actual strategy slide, you can see this four-pillared approach really focused on AI, Bitcoin, this impressive pipeline, 2.8 gigawatts. I'll let you talk to their market cap in a second. And then the fourth pillar, this renewable computing, which we got to see in firsthand.
Yeah, absolutely. And, we were impressed. We did the tour of Silverton on the first day. We'd been to the Childress site in the morning. And to be honest with you, it was going to take, obviously a big site to compete with that one there. But what impressed me about Silverton is the fact, again, it's the sheer size. We look at Soluna, the market cap today is around the sort of like $50 million mark, just slightly under there. Share price, $1.59. We've seen it as high as $5.14 this year. So heading towards, a lower part of not quite at the lows, it's been as low as 36 cents, but sort of like, in that sort of mid $1.50 range there. And as long as it keeps above that dollar range, it doesn't have the SEC on its backs. But we were impressed at Silverton. They're 100 megawatts there. You've got Dorothy 1, Dorothy 2. I like the modular setup there. It's easy to build. It's easy to transport. They've also, at the site there, they've got a 2 megawatt area now. That's going to be their test and see in terms of AI HPC delivery, and we'll come on to that in a second as to what that could lead to. But I was impressed also by meeting some of the power companies who came to the site at the same time and introduced themselves. There's a very, very good relationship with some of these wind farm power operators out there. And one thing we noticed when we were driving around, I think we did about 1,500 miles in Texas during that week, Bryce, was the amount of wind farms that we covered over that mileage.
Yeah, and I'll actually play a clip that talks exactly about that. The team stating they now have inbounds from other power companies. One thing we learned was a lot of the people who invest in wind farms will invest in multiple farms to spread out their risk. So they may partner with Soluna at a specific site, but they may have their foot in the door of multiple other generating sites as well. So they're getting inbounds. I'll play you guys that clip right now.
So a lot of data centers, the grid serves them. I like to say that we serve the grid. And so if the grid needs us to spin down or spin up, there's telemetry that tells us to do that.
What we're doing has a real purpose. It solves a real problem. And now we're able to solve that problem at scale.
People are starting to see that this works. And so every single wind farm around here that has turbines that aren't spinning, even when it's windy out, sees that any wind farm that has a Soluna data center, their turbines are spinning. A lot of big partners that have big wind farms have started wanting to work with us.
Soluna is solving a real problem for independent power producers, and they're generating an incredible amount of value as a result.
So this is definitely a differentiator. A lot of the other large-scale miners, they're talking about this ferocious competition for megawatts, whereas Soluna now has a lineup at their door. The other piece of the puzzle here I wanted to get your thoughts on, Anthony, you talked about market cap. It's difficult for a lot of these companies to scale when they don't have the size, the market cap, the balance sheet. If you look at the capital partners that Soluna has now started to attract, this seems to be really making steps in the right direction as well.
Yeah, there's some big names on here. Galaxy, we know about Galaxy, and Galaxy just signed a recent contract with Soluna to basically take their whole Bitcoin mining strategy away from the Helios site so they can focus the Helios on delivering HPC. They've already signed a contract with CoreWeave, so they need a home for those miners. And guess what? Soluna are going to take them all. And you can also see from the photographs at the Catty site there, that those modules are starting to be planned and where they're going to be located, and it won't take too long to get those in. I think they've put a timeline of Q1 to have everything up and running, and I firmly believe they'll achieve that, because these are very, very quick to put together, and they'll get those miners on there. They'll start earning revenue straight away. Spring Lane Capital have provided up to, I think, $100 million in terms of a funding that they can access there, and that's going to help them, grow. The problem that Soluna had was they had all the ideas, they had all the projects, all on paper there. You've then got to go out and try and track the funding with it. And with some of the early projects, it was a case of you had to bring in that funder effectively, agree the terms and conditions, and then when the funder gets paid the majority of their money back, then it works in favor of Soluna. But that could take 3, 4, 5, 6 years to achieve that, and so it's a long-term aspiration to start getting some serious money from the project. Now that they have not only the share price at a position which offers more levers to them, and the fact that they've got these capital partners that potentially can support, as names when they go to lenders to borrow, on the basis of having such unique capital partners, that might give them another opportunity to borrow money there. And then Spring Lane Capital, Yorkville Advisors, Generate, another company that we know in the space, all providing support to Soluna. It means they can take on more than one project at a time, and we're seeing that now. They're now doing Project Grace at the Silverton site there, and they're doing Project Catty at the same time. The first phase, 83 megawatts, going to be used for hosting, and then phase 2, as we come on to that one in a second, that's going to be more looks at the HPC AI part of the game, and that will obviously be linked to Project Grace. Project Grace is a 2 megawatt test and see proof of concept, which will take place at Silverton like that. We've seen a number of the miners do that. Look at TeraWulf. They have the Den there, project there. IREN have been doing this at their Prince George site for a number of years now, and you can see what that leads to. Deals with Core 42, deals with FluidStack, deals with Microsoft. Prove you can do it, and then they'll come and be partnered with you. So I think it's an opportunity now to see Soluna start in this next year, 18 months, to start growing out there, and I can only see positive things going forward for them.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the share price as well. We know they recently increased their authorized share count to 375 million. So that's a great lever to use as that share price goes up. You're obviously getting more bang for your buck on any ATM programs. Now, what's interesting to me, you look at these slides of Caddy 1, we're talking about the groundbreaking video. But if you look at the images, you can see the Galaxy modular units already showing up on site. So very quick speed here. Again, this is a tried and true team. They know the process. They know the design. Now it's more of a rinse and repeat. You've talked about the Caddy 1 design. Caddy 2, if we pull this up, almost looks more Corsicana-esque. They've got a large water retention pond. You can see a more traditional large-scale data center. So this is really going to be that second iteration after the Test Grace project, once they've proven themselves, and really that first large step into the AI HPC space.
Yeah, and this could be, significant. If you look at the, it's 83 megawatts, doesn't sound a lot. But think about the latest deal that Cipher Mining did. I think it was 39 megawatts of compute power, $83 million a year over the next 10 years. We're not talking small sums, we're talking significant amounts. So, with 83 megawatts, yes, you're going to have, majority of that will be compute, but because of the location in Texas, we're using a PUE of about 1.4 to 1.5. So that suggests maybe, 55 megawatts of compute power with ancillary power on top of that, maybe 28 ancillary power. That gets you to 83. That's a nice, easy breakdown to that level there. The amount of square feet, 440,000 square feet. They just purchased an additional 50 acres at Project Catty as well. So they've got the extra land there. You can see they want the water part of that as well. So, all ticking all those boxes: fiber, water, power. Just need now is obviously a customer in the future once they've got the Project Grace up and running and proof of concept approved. That's where the next line is there. But you can see a lot of these miners think in the same way. Let's get the proof of concept. Let's start looking at how we can develop the next phase in readiness for when America needs that HPC AI strategy coming into play.
I remember Jeff LaBerge also from Bitdeer talking about their Singapore test operation, and you made the point it's going to be a lot easier in these negotiations if you can walk in and show people you're actually doing it. It seems like that's how the tide has gone. So good foresight on that one. Now, they also give a few project highlights. They've already started the substation upgrade to support the additional 83 megawatts. They've also signed an MOU with the development partner that has deep experience in the HPC space. So this is going to be a great one to keep an eye on. Congrats to the team on the groundbreaking and subsequent a ton of work that's been done there. And a real privilege to see the Silverton site. I can't wait to get down there and see the Caddy site in first person as well. Now, the next company we wanted to talk about here, also hyper-focused on large-scale development for HPC, AI, Bitcoin mining, also focused on multiple sites. Hut 8 has made some big strides since Asher took the head position there. He said give him 3 quarters. We gave him an A+ mark. He's continued to march forward. So what they've actually decided to do, again, in the interest of kind of a unique company strategy, is spin out the Bitcoin mining into ABTC and keep all of the infrastructure data center under Hut 8. So we'll talk about some of the benefits there. But with that being said, they've just recently put out a press release over the summer focused on 1.5 gigawatts of development.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you go back prior to Asher taking over as CEO for that previous sort of 3.5 years, there was a lot of shareholders who were sort of like very critical at Hut 8 to not sort of like delivering any growth strategy in terms of replacing mining machines in growing hash rate. I think they're at that sort of 5 or 6 exahash for a long, long time there. We're watching their peer miners go past. And you're quite right. Asher said, give me 3 quarters. We gave him 3 quarters and he delivered in those 3 quarters. And he's very astute. You know, he's one of the youngest CEOs, if not the youngest CEO in the Bitcoin mining space at the moment. And, you know, he was saying, I'm not prepared to pay top dollar for mining machines. I want to make sure that we manage costs across the company. And he brought some really good initiatives. I'm a chartered management accountant, which is really looks at costs all the time. And some of the things he came up with gave me a nice smile to listen to him say it. And, you know, he's worked that through there and he's got that ethos now in the company. And you can see how they're going about their business. They're no longer standing still. This company is growing and growing and growing. And it's like literally every week we're hearing something new. Now, upon this, you know, commercialization of the sites, Hut 8 expects not just have 1.5 gigawatts, they expect to exceed 2.5 gigawatts of capacity under management across 19 sites. And in connection with the expansion, it's reclassifying the 1,530 megawatts, which you highlighted there, of capacity related to these sites from under exclusivity into a new category under development. So they've got all their power in 4 categories, and we can talk a little bit about all that now.
Yeah, so we've got a slide here that shows their current portfolio. You'll notice at the top it says 1,020 megawatts. Now, if we go to the development pipeline update, you'll see that's the bottom of the funnel, so to speak. Bucket number 4, which is management. Bucket 3 is under development, which is the 1,530 we just talked about. The sum of those two would get you well into the 2.7. They've also got an exclusivity and a diligence bucket. Now, Asher explained these perfectly on the channel when we had him on for our last interview. We would encourage you guys to go in and take a listen to that. But for people who missed that, Anthony, how should they think about these buckets? We're hearing a lot of different companies. We just mentioned Soluna, a 2.8 gigawatt pipeline. We've talked about IREN's 3 gigawatts. Each company kind of classifies these a little differently. What are your thoughts on this 4-level breakdown?
Yeah, I'd certainly be looking at Hut 8 as saying, you know, 2.57 gigawatts now as the power that they have within their development and with their management. So that's currently physically working on delivering on those areas there. The exclusivity is more about what they now have in terms of they've secured the path to ownership through an exclusive agreement or through a tendered interconnection agreement. So, you know, that's something that, you know, in the future they'll be, you know, be able to access there. So it's basically giving them some future proofing. And then diligence really is a sort of like, the additional pipeline. We hear this word pipeline, and it's I won't say it's aspirational. What Hut 8 are doing is they're speaking to the power companies themselves and seeing where they can, bring in and utilize power. Remember, one thing about these companies now, they're great at balancing the grid. If you have areas, and Texas has, got a lot of power there, if you have areas where you're requiring a lot of power during the day, maybe in terms of air conditioning to combat the heat, and then, other times you're not having a lot of requirement, you have to have power at the highest level, but then you need to balance the load. It's no use having 70 gigawatts of power only required for 10% of the year, and then the rest of the average of the year is only 30 gigawatts. You need to have 70 gigawatts all the time. So, companies that provide the likes of the mining, likes of the high performance compute there, can utilize that power as and when it can operate, and take that, that additional power to keep the balance of the load balanced all the way through. And this is where, they're speaking to power companies now, an extra 5.8 gigawatts of potential power there. So yes, it's not signed up at the moment, but they are having those detailed conversations in the same way that Soluna have got their pipeline of 2.8 gigawatts. Remember, Soluna at the moment are operating around about 125 megawatts of power. They just started phase 1 at Catty, which is an extra 83. Once that's completed, they'll do phase 2, another 83. They're building up like that, but they've got a pipeline of about 2.8 gigawatts. And we've met some of these wind farm power companies who are sort of lining up to sort of like, want Soluna to sort of like, to take on some of these projects, maybe in a bit quicker from their liking, so they can actually get some revenues in. Because these wind farms, it's great when when they can sell the power, but there's be times when they can't, and what they do is they switch these wind farms off. And we noticed, even driving through many wind farms, how many were actually operating during the day there. And I would say probably 20 or 30% were only operating. So that's a massive potential, and Soluna have tapped into that more than anybody else in the mining sector at the moment.
Yeah, and we've actually got a clip talking about them with some of that wind power downtime as well. So we'll play that one quick.
A lot of these turbines won't spin all the time, and that's not because there isn't wind. It's because the grid is full. 30 to 40% of the power they make, they're not allowed to sell.
This just leads to a lot of lost megawatt hours. So what Soluna is doing is they are coming in and using that electricity that would otherwise just be lost.
And you can see based on that video exactly your point there, Anthony. I'm glad you brought up the power generation, because we're hearing even from traditional power generation companies, they're not willing to bring on new generation unless they have contracted off-takers. And you're right, if the max power is, in your example, 70 gigawatts, but the average is only 30, why would you build a power plant that you're only going to guarantee less than 50% revenue on? So the Bitcoin miners, to your point, we know Mara is closely involved with this, load balancing, power sync, somewhere to quickly divert a lot of megawatts, make money when you're not necessarily using it on the domestic side. Now, Hut 8, the second portion, I guess, of their differentiated strategy is really this partnership with ABTC. So if we now transition to the ABTC deck, you can see building America's Bitcoin backbone, but using the Hut 8 infrastructure. Now, this one also came out in the Asher interview. You've been very specific, Anthony, in asking these CEOs about depreciation on the buildings. Asher actually said because of this arrangement, they actually just pay essentially rent to Hut 8, and they've factored a lot of that into their calculations. So for me, that was another real check in the box.
Yeah, it was. And actually, if you look at the building there, that you can see the quality of these buildings that American Bitcoin have put it there at the Vega site there, the 200 megawatt Vega site. Now, we've been in facilities. This sort of, the quality of this building here sort of reminds me a little bit of Corsicana in terms of, the size of it. But if you look inside, you can see that things aren't just all massed together there. There is space between all these aisles there. So it looks a very, very, a good operating system there. And hopefully we'll start hearing some of the updates as to how it is operating, maybe compared to some of the other miners. But it looks like, a great site there in the ERCOT grid of Texas. And, one of the largest mining facilities, if look at this one building here, is 200 megawatts in total there. The great thing about this is Hut 8's the architecture. It's a direct-to-chip liquid cooling there, so 120,000 gallons required there. And its rack-based architecture supports 180 kilowatts rack, 50% higher than the 120 kilowatt requirement of NVIDIA Blackwell GPUs. And so, this supports up to the 17,280 Bitmain main servers. So they've looked at it from a technical side of it there. And Asher came out, in a couple of podcasts ago and talked us through this, how theirs was, more unique than some of their peer miners in play there. But it looks very impressive. I hope we get a chance to go and see this firsthand, because the pictures are probably not doing it justice, like we said at the other 5 sites we witnessed a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah, the Vega site looks incredible. And again, future-proofing the build, just like we're seeing with IREN. They're overbuilding the cooling. They're overbuilding the rack capacity in the event of those next generation chips, which we've talked about the chip lifespan extensively on the channel. Now, the other differentiator here for ABTC, they're one of the few miners right now. Hive is another one that comes to mind, Bitdeer, that's aggressively growing hash rate. So they haven't given us a date on the 50 exahash. To Asher's point, they don't want to paint themselves in a corner in terms of purchasing and timing, but they have committed to growing this fleet substantially from where they're at now. The other point of differentiation is they're actually embracing this dual focus between Bitcoin mining and treasury, which is something we've seen a lot of the Bitcoin miners really shy away from.
They have, and just on the Bitcoin mining itself, I mean, you've also got, remember, you've got 2 of the sons of the president. You've got Donald Jr. and Eric Trump, and Eric's articulated at many conferences. I was fortunate to be in Hong Kong earlier this year at the Bitcoin Asia conference, and they're very keen on having a mining company producing Bitcoin at a cheaper rate than you can pay for it. And when you look at the efficiency of the machines there, pretty much on a par currently with what CleanSpark have, maybe not quite as efficient as the IREN fleet, but only probably about 5% less efficient in terms of 16.3 joules compared to 15. Now, if they get to their 50 exahash, then with those new machines going into there, the S21s, Bitmain machines there, that's going to bring the efficiency of the fleet down to 15. So they will be operating the same as IREN. And we know from a power cost, they're very, very much on a par. And when you think about IREN as highlighted as probably one of the only miners who were able to successfully mine Bitcoin at a total profit, not just as a gross profit, as a total profit, incurring all the costs. Maybe this is where Hut realizes if they can achieve the same efficiency, that low power cost, they can produce Bitcoin at a very cheap price when some of their peers are now switching their attention to HPC.
You're sure right there. You mentioned the Trump Association. You can see Eric Trump, crypto is the future. America must lead the way. American Bitcoin will sell the standard. So I guess him and his family are not too worried about this recent sell-off we saw over the weekend. And again, a key differentiator. The last point I just wanted your thoughts on here, this differentiated treasury / mining approach. We've heard executives from Mara on the channel say, you know what, we may have the second most Bitcoin in the world, but we are not a treasury company. We've had some of the DATs, DDC, for example, on the channel. They've said, hey, we're focused on treasury. We're not touching mining. You have ABTC right in the middle, and they're saying, no, we're embracing both.
They are. And they want to use their Bitcoin to make further gains. I don't think they're that keen on selling Bitcoin. They want to try and grow the Bitcoin as a company there because, if you can produce it cheaper than you can go and buy it for, then you don't have to spend as much buying it. You can just produce it yourselves. But you're quite right. They've embraced both the treasury management. I still look at the hodls that CleanSpark, Mara, and Riot have compared to the other miners. And, when they say they're not treasury management companies, I mean, Mara, is doing some sort of treasury management to a certain extent with its hedging futures and things like that they're doing at the moment. So they are doing some sort of strategy there. But we'll get Fred Thiel on. We're looking forward to getting Fred on in the near future. Fred can sort of like give us this real insight into the strategy. What's he thinking? How can he get Mara back to being that number one company again? Because between 21 and 2024, they were by market capitalization, and at the moment they're still the biggest mining company out there, over 60 exahash in mining terms, but they were the biggest mining company in terms of market capitalization. This year's been a challenging year. They were a bit late in determining they were going to start using some of their power to HPC. That's been quite clear now. In terms of what they've purchased, a part of a company through the main owner EDF. And they're also looking, they've purchased a wind farm, so they are doing things there. I just don't think it's getting as much attention as maybe some of these other miners who've landed contracts with some of the hyperscalers. That's took away maybe some of the good stories that other miners are doing, and people are focusing on the Ciphers and the IRENs and the TeraWulfs, and not necessarily on some of the other miners that equally are doing their own little bit to try and improve their strategies as we move forward.
You're quite right there. And we highlighted that digital asset management slide from Mara and from CleanSpark, actually, another example of a company getting involved in this space. But once again, ABTC seems to fully embrace it front and center. Now, the final company or companies we wanted to talk about, again, with a differentiated approach, is Bit Digital and WhiteFiber. Now, what's unique here, similar to Hut 8 ABTC, they've separated the crypto and the data center worlds. However, Sam Tabar, and I guess to his foresight, decided to exit the Bitcoin game. They're working on divesting the Bitcoin mining. They sold all the Bitcoin itself and swapped out for Ethereum. So they're going into a completely, I guess, unique strategy compared to some of these others.
They did. And the one thing they did that you didn't mention, Bryce, is they relocated to the US. How important was that decision? Give them access to a whole new market. So Sam was very clear 18 months ago. I think, he realized when he signed those big contracts, and believe you me, he signed a big contract before announcing anything. They had a $50 million annualized revenue in HPC, when the likes of Hive and IREN were probably 20% of that on an annualized revenue scale. So they waited till they got that big deal announced there. You look where they are today with 23 customers. He was quite right. The market wasn't giving him any credibility for having it all under the Bit Digital umbrella. So he said, I'm going to split this company out if the market continues to do this. And he did. And I think it's paid off because he's given clear guidance now as to what each of the entities are doing.
Now, if we compare the former Bit Digital to what we see now, quite a different landscape, and you can see a specific breakdown of where each one of these, I guess, revenue verticals lies.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, Bit Digital, were, predominantly up until the last couple of years, a Bitcoin mining company. Most of their revenues was through Bitcoin mining. Then 2 years ago, we started to see the revenue start coming through from HPC, and quarter by quarter, it caught up to Bitcoin mining and then overtook it. Now we look at Bitcoin mining. What Bit Digital have done is they've actually relocated all their mining to actually Soluna site at Silverton. So we were there, like I say, a couple of weeks ago, and so in some of those modules there, they've got their hosting the Bit Digital site there. It's a little over 1.5 exahash, so not a significant amount of Bitcoin mining. And to be honest with you, if you ask a direct question to Sam Tabar about the mining side of it, he's probably ready to utilize his thoughts on other areas, because he can see the profitability. I mean, he came on the channel the best part of 2 years ago and said Bitcoin price would have to be 135,000 to get his attention again, and it hasn't reached anywhere near that. And look at where it is today. We're probably 50,000 away from that today. So, he's done the right decision there. He's basically focused their power that they have towards what we now call WhiteFiber, which is providing the cloud services and the data centers, which include Innovum, which they've purchased over this last 12 months there. And they're delivering significant amounts of, cloud services for their clients, 23 clients now, not just the one, 23, and growing.
Impressive. And yeah, some of the first contracts we saw in the space as well, going for the CSP model, which we'll get into in a second. But you can actually see exactly what you mentioned on this transition milestone slide. Milestone number 3, marked as in progress, is exiting the Bitcoin mining operations altogether. Now, you bring up an interesting point about the Ethereum HODL strategy. We've actually seen a number of the DATs, or Bitcoin-focused digital asset treasuries, trading at a compressed MNAV. Now, Digital has gone far enough to actually publish this on their website. They've only got 2 line items. They have WhiteFiber shares and they have Ethereum. Both are publicly traded. Both have real-time prices. Should be very easy to value this company. But as you can see, trading at a 13% discount to the sum of its parts. So this is another interesting angle here and potential opportunity. To your point, Anthony, a lot of the big co-location deals have been stealing the headlines, whereas a lot of these other companies have made some big strides in their own right.
Yeah, I mean, this is really, you're basically, spending 87 cents to get $1 worth of assets here. You're getting more assets than you're actually investing in, and that's happening not just in Bit Digital and a number of other miners as well. We highlight that chart every couple of weeks, that the Bitcoin HODL to market cap, and we noticed from the last couple of weeks there, even the likes of Mara. It's been as high as 120%. The HODL's been 120% of the market capitalization. So the market just not giving any credibility to any of these. And when you look at the number 1 company in the world, Strategy, with a Bitcoin balance about 640 to 650,000 Bitcoin, that share price has dropped something like 60% this year from its highs this year, and it's getting towards the point now where actually I think we're getting closer and closer to the average price that Strategy would pay for each of its Bitcoin. But Michael Saylor, has been on many interviews, and he's basically said it would take a long way drop for it to have any impact on the company. The way the structure's set up there, we'll have to sort of play this out a bit longer in terms of these DATs, because they had a period of time where the market was really giving them a premium, and now we've seen that pull back there. Are we going to see them recover and gain that premium in the future, or are we going to just see effectively them trade towards a 1.0 MNAV, which basically means they're getting the value, what the value is of that date in time?
Now, the nice thing with Ethereum as opposed to Bitcoin is you can actually stake Ethereum. So even if you are given a 1 MNAV, you can make some yield or generate some revenue from that. That's a key differentiator of their business model, not to mention WhiteFiber. So similar to what's been done with HUD 8, WhiteFiber is now the data center infrastructure AI play within Bit Digital. Again, they own approximately 71%, give or take, based on shares outstanding. But they're looking at this as a massive market opportunity. Another slide we've seen virtually in every deck talking about global data center demand, global cloud AI. As I just mentioned, they're involved in the cloud or CSP model. Both of these, in terms of CAGR or compound annual growth, just remarkable.
Yeah, I mean, the actual global data center demand has got a CAGR of 30.6% annually between now and 2030, and the global cloud AI market has got a CAGR of 34.8, nearly 35% between now and 2030. So you can see from market size, in 2024 of 60 billion. Up to 363 billion in terms of the AI market by 2030. And this is not just from one presenter. We've seen many presenters, and actually every time we hear a new presenter, that figure seems to grow. I can remember when Dan came on, three or four podcasts ago, and he was saying the gap was at the moment between 4 gigawatts and the market needed about 30 gigawatts. I've never heard 30 since that time. It's sort of like hedging up towards 40, 50, 60, 70, even 80 gigawatts. There's a real gap, and this is why, I don't think there's going to be any losers in the Bitcoin mining space, because, those miners, and pretty much all of them, have actually now started to look at, how they can position their power towards HPC. So it looks like, it's just a case of, not a case of how, but just a case of, or if, but when And that's how we're talking these through at the moment, because we'll see in 2026 a lot more deals being put to paper as we see more and more companies start changing the structure of their sites away from the mining sites and delivering that HPC.
Yeah, it's like musical chairs. Every company that signs is one less chair for the remaining players in the market. And we've heard many CEOs say every single megawatt will be used at some point. Now, the other advantage for WhiteFiber, they've already got a great portfolio of sites. Their flagship site is in North Carolina in the United States. So similar to Ben Gagnon's kind of eastern seaboard type of location. They've also got 3 data centers in Montreal, Canada. And we've heard from a number of companies, DMG, Hive specifically, that it is very difficult to get access to data center megawatts in Canada. In a lot of places, there's been moratoriums. They're very picky about who they let in. And we actually heard many of the hyperscalers have attempted to enter the market, and regardless of price, they just can't find the facilities. Now, you mentioned in the start of the conversation, we have Kevin O'Leary on Thursday. He's been a huge advocate for Canadian data center growth and development, actually initially planning a 1.5 gigawatt facility here in Alberta, which would be the biggest in the world at the time. We're looking forward to getting his take on this situation as well. But for Bit Digital and WhiteFiber, they've already got these locations. They've already got the clients and the connections in the Canadian and now U.S. market.
Yeah, they've been delivering for the best part of the 2 years now. Certainly since Power Mining Analysis was formed, and they've just grown and grown from that one client to 23 clients. They've already got the MTL 1, 2, and 3 sites all in operation, with either fully owned or leases. The NC one is fully owned as well, and targeted for Q1 2026. That's the biggest site, 99 gross megawatts there. So that's a significant size compared to the other 3 sites, which total in terms of megawatts there, around about 15, 16 megawatts there. So that's a significant site in the US. And so, we'll get to, hopefully have Santabar on the podcast in the next few weeks, just to give us an understanding of what he sees now over this next 12 months, how the Bit Digital and WhiteFiber are going to grow and deliver all the expected strategies that they've been highlighting in their updates.
You're quite right. Now, the final slide we wanted to leave you guys with, in the essence of differentiated strategies, you can see in the WhiteFiber deck, they talk about cloud services. Now, we mentioned the CSP model. We talked about the global demand for cloud AI growth. This is why it's relevant to WhiteFiber and Bit Digital. They're actually operating GPUs. They've been doing it for years. They have clients. So maybe unlike what we're seeing with some of these other companies that are looking for a co-location contract, maybe more similar to like an IREN, Bit Digital and WhiteFiber, they're not scared to get in there and operate the bare metal themselves.
No, they're not, and they've been delivering this, like I say, for the last 2 years. So they roll the sleeves up. They've got the GPUs. They've been delivering the service. They've got the proof of concept on many levels. They're now even purchasing their own data centers. Before they were leasing data centers when they started. I remember they had data centers in Iceland. Now they're actually purchasing data centers. The 3 in Canada and 1 in the US, and so they're actually uniquely ready and understand the risks and strengths of operating yourself. And it looks like they've worked out this is a market for them to continue.
It sure does. And you can see the asterisks at the bottom there. Approximately 90% of deployed GPUs are now under revenue contract. So again, supporting the theory that there is insatiable demand for this stuff. With that being said, hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. We wanted to talk about some of the more unique, maybe undercovered, under-talked about stories, strategies, and HPC models in the space. We'd be super curious to hear your thoughts if you're holding any of these companies, what you think about the renewable, the behind the grid, the spin outs that we've seen, the digital asset strategy. A lot covered in today's video. Hopefully you guys found some value. Hit the like button. Feel free to subscribe. We'll see you back here tomorrow.